Okay, so I'll just give a quick overview of GitHub Actions. I started, well, we'll do that. It works. So I'm Anthony Stone. I started GitHub last February to build GitHub Actions. That's about it. I'm a senior infrastructure engineer on the team. There's about 6 of us on the team at the moment, so kind of mix of front end, back end. If anyone's seen me do front end, you'll know I'm in the back end category. This was a presentation from our annual conference called Universe, which my colleague Goodmunder had presented, so I stole his slides and butchered them terribly, which is why it says not Universe down here. So I'll run through these. Has anyone used GitHub Actions yet? Anyone actually in the beta? Yeah, you would have. Okay. I'm just going to see if I can get their presentation notes on here. It's fine. Yep. So basically, you create a workflow in your repo under a GitHub folder. And a workflow is a set of actions that run, or tasks that run when that workflow is invoked. So this one here is just using our editor to set up, so on push, so any pushes to the repo, and that could be on any branch, this workflow get invoked. So I'll just run through, let this do its thing. So we set some environment variables, which we'll come back to later on. So what this is going to do, any push to the repo, we're going to run this. So we get users, which is just the name of a repo, or an action in a repo, which we'll touch on later. Let's run through here. So we should see this run. At the moment, we're running inside of info. Recorded, too late. So we're running a lot of these actions on Google's GCP, which is Google's Cloud Builder, is the execution environment. So we basically translate your workflow over to our workflow syntax over to a Google Cloud Build and execute it there. So there is a little bit of delay at the moment, but we're in the minute. At the moment, we're just rebuilding the runtime for that to run our own infrastructure. So we'll just run this through. So that workflow that we're seeing creating there at the moment, the only one supported is main.workflow, but the plan is over the next quarter that you'll be able to create others and just import those in your same repo. So you could have like ci.workflow or test.workflow. So I'll show you an example of the syntax of that. So it's basically, this is just a text file in your repo, and you just say, this is the workflow, say hello on push, and then on the push event, resolves is the end state for your workflow, because you can have multiple actions, which we'll touch on later. So this resolve says run the say hello action, which we've got defined down here, and then we've got a bunch of shared ones which you can have a look at, and we'll say basically run this shell action and just call hello GitHub actor, which is the person that pushed that change up or that caused that workflow to be executed. And this is the general syntax of it. I think we forked HCL because we basically restrict the syntax of HashiCorp's HCL. I don't know if anyone's. I think Terraform uses the same stuff. So it's basically a fork of that we restrict a lot of it. So we don't do variable interpolation or anything yet, but I think we may support it if the use cases come up. But at the moment, if you can write HCL, you can probably just fire this through and you'll be good. So we'll run through the workflow. There's like 88 slides, so if we're going too fast, that's probably why. So the general syntax of a workflow is this. So on the event name, so if anyone's used our API for the webhooks, I think there's about 26 events, I think, or something like that. There's a slide here that says the exact number, so I'm probably wrong, that you can hook into. And then resolves is one or many actions that will get executed when this event is handled by your repo. So there's the many syntax. And the event name, 26 events. So check run, check suite. Not all these are going to cover your use cases. There probably are if you're building on top of GitHub. But we do have one called, where's it gone? Repository dispatch, you can just see at the bottom there. So repository dispatch allows you to send your own event. So you might want something to say, like, actually our internal systems have said CI is cool. You can fire off an API call to that and fire off that, and then there's a little bit of an example later on. And then that moves on to the resolves. So the action is the thing that, or the task that runs as part of that when that workflow gets triggered. You can do one, you can do many or one of those. So let's run through so we can get an example. So there. So on push resolves that say hello action, and this is an example of the repository dispatch event. So if you, like say, if you did have that own internal system that you wanted to fire event off and kick a workflow off, you just send something like this to our API and just tell it what the event is. And then that event, when it comes through that repository dispatch, which I'll jump back through here, the event would actually be this. There's certain ones we let you override and don't. But it means that you can write that code to support those things. So we realise that, you know, a lot of people don't use GitHub for JSON.
Sorry.
It's all right. Yep.
Where is that?
Where's which file, sorry? Yep.
Sorry, this is about the context about where these things are defined. Is this on GitHub?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so it's in your repo, so I'll just fly through. Oh, there's one. There's a path. This is the. Yeah, so it's just a dot folder in your repo called GitHub, and then in there is that main dot workflow, which is just a text file with this syntax.
So GitHub essentially
Yeah.
runs those.
Yes. So when those, when we receive those events that you've defined in your workflow, we'll find your workflow based on that commit that's come through, because your workflow might be slightly different on each commit. So we'll find your workflow and then execute any matching workflows. So you can have multiple workflows that are triggered by the same event. You don't have to be one workflow. You could have 5 that are triggered on a deployment or a push and run through it. More often than not, most of the use cases we've seen, it's usually one workflow and then multiple actions. So I'll find an example of that as we come through. Skip. Yeah. So this is the this is like the visual representation of a workflow. So you can say when this push event is received, run this action, which you'll see in the editor when you use it. I'll give you a run through of the demo. Yeah, and that GitHub actor will be the person who pushed it. Where am I up to? Users, which we'll also get to in a couple of seconds. So you can have different types of actions. You can have ones that are built inside your repo. You can have ones that other people have created and shared. So if you had, say WordPress, they decided to create one that did linting testing, you could just import their action. So you know if you're building a WordPress app, you can import their stuff, and you know that's going to be matching their standards. This is an example of the editor. Just going to see if we can find through. So run through some of the keywords that an action can have, which some users can't skip it when it's animating. I get to watch it along with. Here we are. So an action, you got needs, and this is any actions that are dependent on this one. So say this was, you had a deploy action, you could have needs, lint and test, or code style and test, and those code style and test ones would run before this one runs. So we build that DAG for you. Users is the action to run. Runs, every action is a Docker file in your repo. If you're building an action, it's a Docker file, and then whatever things that Docker file needs. Other when you just run someone else's repo, you just put the path to that. And users replaces the entry point to that Docker file, so you could pull down a PHP image and then install in your file, install PHP CS Fixer, for example, and then just use users to run PHP CS Fixer. So just if you've used Docker before, that replaces the entry point. Sorry, that's runs. And then args is the argument to runs. Secrets, which we'll touch on too. We've got a key value store for secrets, which we encrypt at runtime. Those are only available to the workflow whilst it's running, and then a bunch of environment stuff, just key value pairs. Let's see, does anyone get speaker notes on here? No, I'll wing it. So this is probably a typical deployment story. So we've got just a regular Node app here that we want to deploy. Let me just run through. So what we're going to do, we're going to define some of those dependent actions, which I gave an example on earlier around linting and testing, and then a deployment. So this is how you would set it up in the editor. So install, it's going to npm install. So this goes back to that entry point and the argument stuff that we talked about earlier on. So we're not really defining what the runs is here, because this action is just going to run npm by default. And we just say the args is just installed to that npm endpoint. So in this example, we're just doing sequential ones. So we're going to do this one, or serial, so we're going to do this one, and then this we're going to install, then we're going to test, and then we're going to deploy. But in reality, like, you can parallelize these, which will be an example of that in a second. There. So we're going to install the deps, test them, and this one I think is going to do, run lint. It's going to test the code. So these will run in parallel. So this will do once, and then it'll fire off these two actions, or we'll run these for you. And then if either of these fail, we won't do the deployment. And you'll see these in the bottom of the PR when you get your check suites. So here's those tasks. Build, deploy, lint, and test. I suspect we've sped this GIF up because it isn't that fast in reality. It's slow. There. So that's basically taken that npm app, putting it on the site, and then run through, and that's what that graph looks like when we execute it. So the syntax for that in the workflow file, or in your main.workflow file at the moment, would be deploy and push, resolves deploy. You see, we basically define the end state for deploy. So we say when this workflow receives a push event, we want the end state to be deploy, which is down here. But deploy defines these needs, which is test and lint, which are these two actions here. And then, that uses Zeit to deploy it using that Zeit token. Any questions about that one? Easy. We just covered the need stuff. So this is the so we'll probably just quickly touch on the users. So there's 3 forms for users. So you get users as a Docker image, a specific tag or digest. So you can use anything on Docker Hub at the moment. You can run Docker in Docker, and then supply some credentials to your own private registry if you want there, if you want to pull down your own. So you can use any Docker image to run your action. You can use a GitHub repo, which I'll give you an example of later on. We've got loads of actions already set up. Or you can use an action that's defined in your current repository. I think the metrics at the moment, most people are building their own actions and just inheriting another Docker file. So they'll create an action in their local repo that'll say from PHP, run these things, rather than saying run Docker PHP, because they'll probably want to bootstrap their own app and set some of the environment stuff up. I think the cool bit about this is that kind of I'd mentioned with JSON, you can share workflows, so you can find some repositories or projects that you probably develop with most often, and if they've got actions set up for those types, it's just completely reusable from the start. And you don't need to maintain it, which is always a win. This is an example of using a Docker image. And then the repo. So we've got the Actionsorg set up now, and this is just basically execute shell. So if you go to github.com/actions, we've got an org set up with a bunch of these already that you can use and configured. You just need to inject your own secrets, possibly, on some of them, and some of them not. It's worth having a little look. But we've put together a marketplace where you can discover these, which I'll touch on later on. So this is an example of the bin one. So we provide a couple of useful ones, like filter. Filter is really good. So you can use a filter. You use this filter action to filter the propagation of the event. So we mentioned earlier on where you can do that on push, do your test, do your lint, and then deploy to master, deploy to site. You can use the filter action to actually only if it's master, because you wouldn't want that running on every PR or branch. So we'll find a couple of utilities just to help you scan that through, which is just an example of these here. So this one you would only execute the rest of the workflow if this label was, if it had a label called urgent, for example. So this is an example of a local one. So inside this particular repo where we receive the event for the workflow, you'd have the .github. You don't have to have it in this path, but it kind of makes sense, I think, at the moment. Just put them all in the subfolder called actions, and then whatever you want to call it, use another folder underneath it. And inside this folder, you'll have a Docker file, which I think we've got an example of. Yeah, so to create an action that we'll execute for you, just create this folder, create a Docker file, and then whatever assets that Docker file needs, we'll inject the repo context, which we'll come back to, plus all the code too. But if there's anything that Docker file needs to build, pop it inside the action, which means that other people can use that too. I'm guessing that Twilio one's just going to be wiring up the API call. I think we'd already kind of mentioned command and args. Here's kind of probably a more complete example. So we're going to run this Docker action, or for one, a Docker file, and then we're just going to run inside just find doc. It's kind of shows you can use the Docker stuff, and then just how you would override the entry point. I don't think the entry point is for that one by default, but so you can specify multiple args in different syntax. You got the array syntax, and then just like that. There's an example of this one. And that's just going to call npm install. Keep on saying we'll come back to this GitHub Actor one, but we will. The probably worthwhile calling out here is this variable substitution. If the thing that you use for users doesn't do variable substitution, most often than not, you probably want to call shell and then that, so you can pass these things in. Otherwise, it just won't get executed. So if I just called, it's probably a bad example, but if I did an npm run and then a variable here that's set from the end, because we're not executing the shell to execute npm, we wouldn't replace that for you. So it'd just be empty when it runs. Does that make sense? and syntax for secrets. So that is just the key of the secret. And the UI allows you, you can only specify secrets through the UI at the moment. But we are thinking about exposing that over the API. Try to keep the OPSEC people happy. Just back to that workflow we did earlier on. This is set up that's where you set up your secrets. So by default, we add a GitHub token. So for every time we execute a workflow for you, we generate an access token that you can use to authenticate with GitHub. And we provide some Git credential helpers for those, so you don't really need to know too much about it. But if you want to talk to the API or pull down some other information, that token's going to be there for you, and it's only valid for the lifetime of the workflow. At the moment, each action on the lifetime stuff, each action can run for an hour, which is quite a while. So we have had a few people try and run Bitmine and Bitcoin stuff, and interesting. So don't do that if you have that. Actually. Yeah. So this is just us setting up a new token, a new secret type token, and then the value, and setting that through. And we specify it. Can't see here, but each of these secrets we assign to an action. Technically, they're like when we execute them, the secrets are only available to the action. But if you had, say, Docker login here, and we say, here's my Docker credentials, Docker will create a, I think it's config.docker or whatever, JSON file, and it'll store those credentials in there, which means when your next action comes through, it can read that from the file system. So the isolation model that we've got at the moment is kind of, well, it's definitely only the workflow, and kind of depending on what the actors do or what the actions do, isolated to the action, which we'll get onto the file system stuff next. So I'll see if I can pull this through. So that's it. To create an action, like I say, you create that Docker file, and this is a general syntax. So if you create these aren't mandatory, but if you do create these labels, when you create an action, we'll scan these as you commit these in, and add them to our marketplace, so basically other people can find them. I think next week what will happen, we're going to add a new page to an org. So if you've got an org on GitHub, you'll see all your org's actions. So it allows you to share them throughout the org, make them a little bit more discoverable because it's not easy. So yeah, pop in these labels on your Docker file and then execute whatever you want to be doing here. And this is that, basically, the variable substitution stuff. More often than not, you'll probably want to execute it with a shell and then the action, so you don't have to be swapping a lot of the environment variables out. We touched on the environment, so I'll pull up the immutable stuff. So when we execute an action, each action gets these environment variables set. And this is probably most important to least important, I would say. So repository where the action executed, the ref, so that could just be your branch, develop, master, the commit char, the event that fired it, who did it, the workflow that we're currently executing, the action that we're currently executing, and then if you need any other additional information, we provide this workflow.event JSON, which you can parse, which isn't great. It works. And then the workspace. So we'll touch on the workspace next, but the workspace is something that lives throughout the lifetime of the workflow. And GitHub Home, which also persists through the workflow, which is what I was saying about the whole Docker login. Anything that gets written to your home directory in an action would get persisted throughout the whole workflow. So it's just something to be mindful of, I would guess. So the event JSON file, which we'll show through. So we set this environment variable so you can find it, and it looks similar to this. So obviously it'd be insane to set environment variables for all of these things. More often than that, we see people probably just using JQ and passing the JSON file and pulling stuff out of it. which I'll show you an example on the demo that I've got at the end. Doing that, it's not horrendous. Could be better, but. And then this is the mutable stuff, the stuff that you can write to between actions. You do your workspace, which is it lives at this path. Working directory for, so basically consider that as your working directory for actions. If you're going to write to it and pass some stuff through, so see if you had a step that generates a file, that action have one action that writes to this, and then the next action can pull that through. So it could I don't know, take an image, transcode it, do whatever. Next action would be upload that somewhere else. This is the place where you persist those things between actions. So we do a full git clone of the repo that comes through. So you do have that available to you, so you don't have to clone that down. We've got the home directory, which is here. It's probably not worth mentioning this one. Not right now. And everything else. Exit codes. If your action returns anything but 0, consider it failed. I think we have one other X code that we use internally, but I think we can get rid of that once we move over to the new runtime. I think it's like 197 or something. But it's quite a nice way of just being able to stop a workflow at any point. If you decide this user can't deploy, or this branch shouldn't be deployed, you just exit one, and then that would stop it. So we kind of mentioned the filters earlier on. So I'll show you an example of this now. So you can use our filter action. You can say, basically this ref has to be master for this thing to continue. Otherwise, it'll basically exit one and then fail. And we'll stop everything else running after that. So it could be that you want to do, you could have a staging workflow, and then you say actually if it's develop, you run through, or if it's deploy that staging, or if it's master, deploy it to prod. So you can have multiple workflows, and the filters gives you a nice way to kind of stop those off. And this is our filter one, which is basically just this. You'll see the shell script in a minute. But they're pretty standard. I mean, there's nothing stopping. There isn't any magic to them. It's just a Docker file that executes something and returns that status code. Let me see if I can bring up the. And these are the scripts that we've got at the moment. So whether an action name was a given value, a branch is a given value with it has a label, ref, tag. It just stops you writing a lot of that boilerplate code. And just lets you do a little bit of reuse there. Actually, I think we've got an example of the ref. So we'll execute that. If you pull in the action and then change the runs to ref, we'll execute this and basically exit out if this ref's not right. It's a bit weird because it kind of pivots a lot around Docker, but it's not really Docker. Docker is more like the runtime to execute a script for you, so it gives you that control. I think at some point we might end up adding a little bit more functionality. So we've got being able to run Docker Compose on the roadmap, but we're not really sure that's where we want to go to. We don't allow people to set up a whole stack and run up a database and run all the tests and run all the CI. A lot of it is just like we'll run an arbitrary piece of code for you, and just at the moment, Docker is just a nice way of packaging that up for you. We do have some plans for a quarter or so, the next quarter maybe, where you could just say give it a JS file and we detect that that's a JS file, and we'll wire up OptoKit, which is our SDK for GitHub, and authenticate that and say, right, okay, we'll run this for you. But at the moment, whilst we're still in beta, I think Docker is probably the primitive that's going to stay around for a little while. You can find out some more info here. I flew through 86 slides. I'll hit some questions. I've got a demo after you, which is a little bit more applicable to the group. Let's do some questions. There's loads. There's no way anyone understood all of that.
So where you had secrets,
Yeah.
values, where are the values of those stored? So say you've got an organisation, you've got like say AWS keys, where do you keep those values?
So we keep that on our infrastructure. So we create a unique key for that repo, and then we encrypt those values, and we start. And we generate a key that can decrypt those values when the workflow runs. So it's like a one-time key.
Like me as a user, when
Yeah.
I enter, say, my AWS key.
So when it's in the editor at the moment, so let me bring that up. Let me share this over. So if I go on this .github folder and then main.workflow, this is this is action we've got here. So I'll just go to this part of the demo that I'm going to do in a second. So you got I've got a workflow here. So you can see workflow called PR, and when we receive the pull request event, we're going to execute this code style, and this is a local action. And then these are the secrets that I want to pass in. So we'll go back to the visual editor and then click edit here. We can set them here. So just do AWS secret. Save. And those get decrypted and then passed into the action. One thing worth noting is that you can't use the GitHub prefix at the moment, and we're probably not going to let you do it, which is why on the demo I need a personal access token to do some of the things we're going to do. I've got github.part, but other than that, there isn't really any restrictions. Just don't use the GitHub prefix, and obviously just makes it a little bit safer should we decide to add that later on. Cool. Anything else? Nathan? It's free under beta at the moment, and I think the plan is that people are going to get so many free minutes of execution time, and then you can buy more. That's the plan so far. Whether that changes, I don't know. Obviously got that sweet Microsoft dollar at the moment, so which allowed us to give free private repos to everyone. So maybe we'll get free action time too. But yeah, we'll see. I think everyone's going to get some free amount of minutes. So it could be the case that people who don't really use it much are probably going to get it for free, essentially. We are at the moment trialing or benchmarking it against Pages. So we're going to try and get Pages to use this and then push that up and use that as kind of a use case because lots of people use Pages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we just say like here, push here, and that gives us kind of quite a good benchmark of how what people are using. Anything else? Fine.
I can't remember the terminology, but you could specify different sources, so you could have like a GitHub repo for an action.
Yeah.
Where you have that path style, is that limited to just public repos, or can you call an action from a private repo?
So anything your account has got access to, you can hit. Yeah. So you could hit a private repo. So basically, just to authenticate, we use that same GitHub token. So if that GitHub token that we generate on behalf of the user has access to that repo, they can pull that action in. What I'll do, I've got a demo. This is the wrong one. So I'm just going to give a quick demo of an action as it runs. So this is a PHP app. It's been a little while since I wrote some PHP, so forgive the committing a vendor. It's like a cardinal sin. So what I'm doing, I'm just going to jump through. And then edit this file as a PR. And let's just say someone who just doesn't really. Well, maybe the indent 8. Where is he? There he is. I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to create a branch. I'm going to call balls. I did venison. I'm going to create a PR. So what this is going to check for make sure the code and style fits. So I'll look at that workflow whilst that's running.
No, I didn't do any of this, to be honest.
So yeah, so this is whenever a pull request is received, execute the code style action, and this action is local. So I'll show you that in a second. We pull in the GitHub token. There's certain restrictions at the moment, which I think we're going to have in the get rid of in the next couple of weeks. Where if you're going to do something slightly more exotic, which I wouldn't say creating a branch and doing the PR is exotic, but use a personal access token instead. So most of the team at the moment has just been creating a bot account that has a personal access token, which most likely you probably create a CI user or whatever anyway, so it's probably not going to be a problem. And I'll show you that code. So you can see you got that .github. Like I say, this path, it doesn't really matter, but I think it makes sense to nest them underneath actions and then the name of the action. Show you the Docker file. So the Docker file is just pulling in PHP 7.1, installing some certificates because I hit the GitHub API, curl, JQ, and Git, installs PHP CS fixer, and then basically runs this shell script. And what the shell script does, I'm going to get all the judgment here, this is horrendous. Basically sets some creds, sets up a Git to say it's bot user created it. Use JQ here just to pull out the state of the pull request, because the pull request could be changed or just opened or edited, changed and edited the same. So anyway, pull request now multiple states, the pull request number, the pull request title. So here, I'm just checking that it hasn't been this user that creates this pull request, because I'm going to create a pull request later on. So this is run through, going, okay, I'm just going to check it's me, and then if I'm not the one who if I'm not the one who's created this, I'm just going to exit it out as a success. I took down prod last week because I didn't do this, because we just fired off infinite pull, because the thing raises PRs. So I raise a PR, then the action runs and raises another PR for the PR, which wasn't great writing it up. And then find all the PHP files, run PHP CS fixer, check to see if there's any changes using Git. If there aren't any changes, then it's perfectly valid. And then I just create a branch based off the PR ref that come through. I just hit the GitHub API to create that. So what should happen now, that should have 2 PRs, not that one. So you can see here, this one failed its code style check, but then it's been pinged in this PR. This is PR 11. So what that action's done is it's created this PR that fixes all the code that Mr. Benison's pushed up. So obviously, more often than not, you just fail it and just say, hey, just go fix it, you're an idiot. No one indents 6 and 8. But it's kind of like, yeah, it just makes it a little bit easier. So you can just do it and just go, right, okay, we'll merge this pull request. And this is merging it into the branch that this fictitious Mr. Benison created. And then we'll run that action again because the PR's changed. You'll see it down. It'll kick off in a second. Yeah, so that's kicking off there. And this should pass. I think what I really like about Actions is got that kind of network effect. I know GitLab do lots of, you can use the CI/CD, you can use lots of their things already in there, and you probably do most of this using their API. But with GitHub, you've got loads of other people, it's already out there, people creating the actions, you can share those. Like, you don't need to write these things yourself. It's up to you how you wire them up. There we are, that's done. Any questions about the demo? Hey? Yeah. It's only if it's public we'll add it. Unless it's an org, we'll add it to that org. So if you had an org and everything's private, we'll add it to like a Holden page. And so you can discover those actions. So it could be you deploy to prod action or whatever. Yeah. I'll just do that one. Easy. Is there any more questions before we call it a day? Want to see anything else? I got loads of stickers. I brought those. Take those. Get over there. Nice. Represent. Nothing? And go back over anything? Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much.